Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast, and a very special welcome to a lady coming in from, it's inland Queensland, from a place called Toowoomba. Now, before I introduce her, it happens to be the second largest inland city behind Canberra, so it's a very, very populous place. Can I say, is it right to say Ms. Tracy Sheen or just Tracy Sheen? What do you prefer?
I've been called worse than everything, so go
So,
where you like.
all right. So Tracy Sheen, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have some time with you today.
Oh, look, we've already had a great conversation, so I think your listeners have missed out on the best part already.
Well, I often wonder whether we should actually start recording as soon as we jump on Zoom. But because there are sometimes things that are said that absolute gold, and say, oh, you've got to remember that. And when we press record, and more often than not, when we press record, we go off in different tangents and we actually don't come back to that actual conversation.
Exactly, a behind the scenes.
Yes. There's got to be something in that. Maybe there's behind the scenes, all the tidbits, and they have the blooper reels and stuff. But as I said to you, and for people who have been listening to this podcast for a while, there are no bloopers because what you get is what the conversation was. So there's no outtakes, there's no edits, there's no, oh, can you hang on, can you say that again and ask that again and let's do it again? No. What you hear is what we're talking about. So Tracy, Monday, just after the Anzac Day weekend, great day to be alive. You were talking about how wonderful it is in Melbourne, given in Toowoomba, it's not. I was going to say not a cloud in the sky in Melbourne, but there's clouds everywhere. Not a ray of sunshine to be seen.
Apart from us, Darren, we're two
Yes,
rays of sunshine.
absolutely. But you were saying before we did press record that Toowoomba sometimes seems a little bit similar to Melbourne, and then like four seasons in one day.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to wander out with the twin set, the umbrella, the trench coat, and the singlet. So you never know where it's going to go.
And a couple of different SIM cards as well, because coverage is not all that great up there, apparently.
Yeah, well, regional Australia, I travel all around regional Australia, and I average 200 days on the road and around 150,000 Ks a year. So there are a
Wow.
lot of places I go to that, you don't necessarily have one provider over another.
Man, that is a lot of kilometers. That is a lot of kilometers. How does it feel? How does the chauffeur driver feel about all those kilometers? You sit
He
in the
is
back of the.
fabulous.
He's fabulous. He's good.
He is fabulous. So we are literally, as we speak today, chatting with the real estate. Our house is going on the market this week,
All
and
right.
we are going all in on the digital nomad life. So we've signed off on a caravan, we're getting a new car, and we are just embracing the fact that we are on the road 200 days. So let's turn it into a
Wow.
24/7, 365.
That is awesome. In fact, there's a few colleagues that have done that or are in the process of doing it. One of them of which is overseas at the moment doing that. Great. It's fantastic. Good on you.
Yeah,
That'll be very
it's a great
exciting.
country. And look, we've got some amazing, I'm a regional girl, right? I grew up in northern New South Wales. Choose to live in regional Australia now.
Mm.
Why would I do anything except support my regional compadres driving all around the countryside?
That is awesome. That is sensational. So I look forward to following that because that'll make for another book, potentially.
Maybe,
Maybe.
maybe. There's
Maybe
a
there's something in
story
the
in
works.
everything.
All right, let's get into this. I'd love to talk to you about all things sales leadership, particularly AI. You've been in sales for a long, long time. We were reminiscing before we press record that we've both been at Optus and Telstra back in the day. You've done a lot of work with retail space at Telstra, obviously, Optus World back in the day. and more recently doing a lot of work in the AI space. So you're an award-winning speaker, author, and AI strategist. You run a business called The Digital Guide. And for the people listening, just so you know, Tracy is an expert at what she does because over 2,000 keynotes and workshops across your career. And it'd be remiss of me not also to mention that you're also the 2021 author of the Australian Business Book of the Year, The End of Technophobia, and the author of the newly released book. Well, it's coming out in May, I believe.
Hmm.
AI and You Reimagining Business. So, hey, this is going to be a great conversation. What I'd like to do, as you listen to a few of these episodes, always like to delve into a bit of background in terms of what you were brought up doing in the business world, but specifically, Tracy, what led you to move down this path now, where you're doing a lot more work in the AI space, particularly around selling.
Yeah. Well, like all good careers, it chose me, not the other way around, right? And it's that hindsight's a wonderful thing. So I grew up, mum and dad were one of the first in Australia to import electronic scales.
Okay.
So I grew up sitting on the floor of their workshop pulling apart electronic scales when I was like 5 or 6, learning how to solder boards back together and what happens if I do this,
Yep.
and sometimes they were plugged in and that did not end well, and other times they were not, and that was okay. Um, so looking back, I kind of go, that's probably where it started.
Yeah.
And then we relocated from Sydney to northern New South Wales. Mum and dad bought a general store, and I literally grew up behind the counter of a general store. So that was where my love of relationship selling, I guess, came into
Mm.
the part. But the digital was always there because I convinced mum and dad to get a two-person Atari and stick it in the front of the store. And then I learned how to open the Atari up and rig the game. So you come into my house, this is my game. You are never going to clock this machine. Let me just tell you that right now.
Wow.
So, yeah, and then when I left high school, I landed a gig straight in Strathfield Car Radios. The year was 1990. The phones were the size of house bricks, and it went from there.
Strathfield Car Radio. That is a name
Another
from the
blast from the
past.
past, huh?
It is. And they were so huge. And I remember the phones you were talking about. One of my colleagues before I went to Optus, he was one of the first in Victoria to have a car phone, and
Mm.
he'd literally take his car phone out of his car and in a briefcase walk down the street with it. He'd sometimes to be talking on it, and people would look at him and say, "What the hell's that guy doing?"
The Motorola 3600 transportable. Yes, I remember it well.
Mm,
Yeah.
amazing, amazing. So when did the I guess the business element come into it? You spent some time at Strathfield Car Radio. You're talking before we press record about helping people, particularly in retail stores, put devices in the hands of customers.
Mm.
When was it the early days where it started to form that relationship selling area, or was there something else throughout your early part of your career that really was the catalyst for what you do today?
No, it was really interesting. As you get older, you reflect more. I don't know whether that's, a sign of early onset dementia or just that I enjoy reflecting. Because mum and dad were self-employed, I kind of recognized early on that that was what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what that meant, right?
Okay.
Or what that looked like. So I would always talk myself into situations with jobs to learn what it was I needed to learn, and then I'd just bounce.
Yeah.
I recognized when I was finally diagnosed with ADHD at 48 that that was probably an indicative sign of, some kind of neurospiciness as opposed to me just wanting to learn a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
But it was always sales. It was
Yeah.
always sales. So I grew up behind, like I said, the counter of a general store. You had to always put the smile on and be
Mm.
available for whoever came in and talk about what they wanted to talk about. Um, so that building a relationship was kind of always there from the get-go, and it would just morph into whatever role I had at the time. But what I recognized was that the widget, the product, the service didn't matter if the relationship was there.
Yeah.
So that was what I guess kind of stood me in good stead, that allowed me to showcase that, whether I was training people how to sell, as you mentioned, putting devices into the hands of retailers to teach them how to share that with business owners, or whether it was training apprentices or whatever that was. It always just came back to that old-fashioned country, have a chat, just get to know your people. Like, if you actually are enthusiastic and genuinely give a damn about what they're interested in, the solution will find itself.
Mm. It's interesting you say that because there's a lot of people out there that will train sales, and a lot of it's going to be product or service related, and it's all geared around how do I get this product in the hands of that person and try to retrofit because I want to see a perceived need, which
Mm,
comes across as almost like convincing. But then when you have people who understand that at the end of the day, people want to do business with those who they know, they like, they trust, and who they remember. It may not necessarily be all about the relationship, but you do have to build some level of relationship where there's a level of trust and respect there. Because without that, you're just convincing or flogging a product. Was
absolutely.
there something in the early years that, because I'm sure that the experience you've had across working for some big organizations, you might have seen the other side of that, was has, close it all at all costs. And what have you now arrived at in terms of, I guess, the philosophy of Tracy Sheen around selling?
100%. You cannot escape the corporate reality of what, you have KPIs, and whoops, we've accidentally bought a pallet of these things and now we need to move them. So I get that, but that was never me, and I was never going to be that person. So when I did escape corporate life eventually, my now husband and I started a coffee business because,
Okay.
as you do, you walk out of telecommunications and you go, I'll start a coffee business. That makes perfect sense. Um, and I used to talk people out of our product. It was
Talk
quite
them out of
funny,
the
but
product.
talk them out of it because it wasn't right. And, at the end of the day, the area that we were operating in was a small area. I didn't want to be known as the person that was going to sell them the wrong thing. And quite frankly, I didn't want to deal with the headache of them coming back afterwards and going, hey, this thing isn't right, doesn't work, or whatever. I'm really not that, I don't know, nice to deal with if something goes wrong. So I'd rather than just have a good experience from the get-go. So I made a point when we started that business to get to know our air quote competitors,
Yeah.
to find out what they were doing and what they were offering. And I would often kind of say to somebody, look, we're probably not the right fit, but hey, let me introduce you to Darren. Darren's got the thing that I think is going to work for you.
Mm.
This is why. Let me hook you up and have a chat.
Yeah.
So and it would be the amount of times that we would get a call back, 12 months, 3 years later, or we'd get a contact from someone else to go, hey, you just spoke to my mate and that wasn't the right thing for them, but I want to have a chat to you because I think we are the right fit. So again, it was just, I don't know if it's that country kind of ethics or if it was my mum and dad. I really can't put my finger on it, but for me, it comes down to values and ethics, right? Like, I'm not going to sell you something or do something that isn't going to work at
Mm.
the end of the day. I'd rather connect you to somebody who's going to have the right solution and have you still in my orbit for the next opportunity, rather than flog you something that I know is not going to be a good fit and have you whinging and moaning about me to every man and their dog. Probably
So,
not what you want to tell your sales guys, though, is it? So cheers.
well, it's an interesting approach, and I just want to clarify: was that how you did things before you left telco, or was that
It's
something you
probably
carried?
why I ended up leaving telco, Darren, because they didn't appreciate the way that.
No, that's fine. I appreciate that because I still think there are people within any kind of industry, particularly IT, that the ones that do it really well and they earn a great reputation of being an ethical person, the success tends to follow them, right? They may not get the short-term accolades, but they certainly get the long-term sustainable success. But what I was going to ask you was that approach really prevalent were you talking about that in the coffee business? You were. Yeah,
yeah. But also that's just been the way that I've operated really since day one.
yeah.
And I really do think upon reflection, the little general store we have is in a town called Casino, which is,
Oh yeah,
quite a small town in northern New South Wales. You could very quickly get a reputation as being, there's not a big pool of people to sell to, right?
yeah,
You sell somebody the wrong thing to begin with, they're not coming back to you.
no,
So you may as well find the right solution or connect them with the person that has the right solution
yeah,
and know that you're going to get the next sale and the sale after that and the mate sale and all the rest of it rather
yeah.
than, you know, um, bastardize one opportunity.
It's this, and for people listening to this, it might sound like common sense, and philosophically, there'll be people that listen to this and say, "Yeah, yeah, I understand that. I really understand that." But you don't understand. I'm under pressure. I've got a sales manager that's riding me like a bronking bull, right? I've got to hit my number this week. We're coming to the end of April as we're recording this.
Mm,
So I'm behind on my target. So it means I've got to go and get something because all my manager is asking me is what is my gap closure strategy?
yeah,
And that is a pressure, that is a reality for a lot of people.
absolutely.
What we're saying though is uh, to be sustainably successful in sales, you've got to somewhat remove yourself from the pressure of getting the perfect outcome because you don't want to come across as desperate, having what we call commission breath. And one of the key things I've always said to people is that, hey, the sale actually doesn't start until after the sale is made. So if
Mm,
that's the case, what are you doing to build a relationship to the point where there's a level of credibility and respect? Whether that ends up in a sale in the short term or not, what investment are you making in that relationship that may actually give you a better chance of a sale, but more importantly, a repeat sale down the track?
absolutely. Absolutely. And that, it's such a good point that gap closure strategy. Mine was always contacting the people that I had previously dealt with.
Mm,
G'day, Darren. It's been a couple of months. How's everything going? Particularly in telco or IT, there's always an upsell, cross sell opportunity.
totally.
So now, once you've been utilizing my stuff for a while, now I have the perfect opportunity to go, hey, so how's that thing going? And have you checked out the new blah, blah, blah that, got released such and such a time? Oh, no, I haven't. Well, tell me about it. Yeah, well, hey, mate, remember you were telling me about the kids and this
Mm,
going on? Perfect opportunity to, lock that in now. Or you were mentioning that, you were bringing a new person on board, is now a good time to have a chat to them. So
yeah.
I think there's always that opportunity, and that's the relationship piece for me. I'm always looking for those. Okay, who do you know? Who are you
Yes.
connected with?
Yeah.
Who are you affiliated with? And it may not be you, but if I do right by you, I can still go back to you and go, hey, Daz, you mentioned that you were
Mm,
doing something with the AFL club. Who could we have a chat to now that might
yeah.
be ready to do something?
Absolutely. And it's a classic Cialdini law of reciprocity because it's not, you're not doing that for a transaction, even though a transaction may be the result of it.
Yeah,
You're doing it because it's the right thing to do.
yeah,
And the thing is, we don't know who we're connected with, right? And so
absolutely.
you've got to be really conscious of the person that's in front of you. You've got to be treating them with respect, but don't see them as a commission check.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's so with all that, given that you've spent a lot of time and you have spent time in Melbourne and Sydney and so forth, but a lot of your career has been in regional. Do you sense that there's a difference regional versus city in terms of the way people purchase, the way people build relationships, the way even things like online versus face-to-face communication? What are some of the biggest? Because there'll be people listening to this who are in regional centres or have customers and clients in regional centres
Hmm.
that maybe are not necessarily getting the cut through that they would hope.
100%. It is so different selling in metro versus regional, even today. Um, I liken it to, and again, we joked about this earlier. I'm old. A lot of
Well,
my metaphors are pop culture, 70s, 80s kind of references. So strap in, folks. Do you remember there was an episode of The Simpsons really early on where the monorail salesperson came to town? And he was just kind of going town to town selling the monorail, right? And there was this whole big song and dance routine about, monorail, monorail. A lot of regional communities still feel like that.
yeah, okay.
Someone drops into town and they book the hotel for a couple of days, a week, whatever. And they're there with their jazz hands doing this is the best thing since sliced bread. Gone.
Yeah.
They don't see them again
Mm,
at all. Never. Gone. And the regional guys hate it.
yeah.
If you are looking to build a sustainable business with regional clients, I've found, and it's very true of the business that I'm doing now, I have had to go and visit locations. It's the third time I visit them in person that they will follow me online, that they will do whatever I ask them to do.
The third time.
Third time.
Yeah.
First time I go in, classic case, I started going up into the Isaac region, which is kind of Moranbah west of Mackay, mining community. I got brought in to run some digital workshops for the business community affiliated within the mining town. The first time I went to Moranbah, I'll never forget it. There were 5 people in the room, and I was like, awesome. This is, like, I don't care if one person turns up. I'm going to
Yeah.
sit down and have a great chat with them. And you
Yeah.
better believe that person's going to get absolutely everything that they need in the 2 hours that we've got together. So 5 people, fantastic. At the end of it, they were like, oh my God, this wasn't a waste of time.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, like, let me put that on my testimonial, wasn't a waste of time. Thanks. Um, but the next day I got a phone call from the person that organized it to like, you didn't try and sell them. You didn't do anything. You just met them where they were. And I was like, well, what? I'm not quite sure what you thought I was there to do. Like,
What do
I
you want
don't
me to do?
actually have a product. I'm literally just there to help them understand technology. So I went back, it was about probably 6 months later, 20 people in the room.
Same sort of workshop?
Now, same organization, same. So I went from 5 to 20. Now, I like they kind of joke because people basically line the road as I'm driving in, going like waving little flags, like something out of The Crown. I'm driving down the street doing my royal wave, you know. It's not quite that like that. But the last time I was there, we had like 60 odd people.
Wow.
And they drive now from a couple of hours to come in
Yeah.
because they know I keep showing up. They know that I follow them online and I will check in how they're doing. They know that they can message me and I'll
Mm.
respond to them. So I play the long game. And my belief is if you want to build a sustainable sales business in a regional area, it's
Yeah.
a long game.
Yeah.
Don't play the shortfall. They see through that so quickly.
Mm.
You will be booted and you will never have an opportunity. Never. Because they go back generations and
Yeah.
they will remember that time that that person came from such and such 20 odd years ago and tried to sell me that thing. So you got to play the long game is my advice in regional communities. The flip of that is go into metro and I try and sit down and have the same conversation I would have with a council or a chamber or an association or a corporation. And I'm like sitting down going, so, hey, how was your weekend? And they're like, great.
Why are you asking me?
Like, so I have to remember, oh, yeah, right. I'm in Kent Street in the city or I'm in Collins Street.
Yeah.
It's like, 2 minutes of platitudes. And then it's, all right. So appreciate your time today, Darren. I know we've got an hour. Let's get into it. Here's what I'm kind of thinking. This is what we've talked about. Bang,
Mm.
bang, 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 bang. They don't have the space, the time, their priorities are very, very different.
Mm.
So it's recognizing and being able to do that shift. Interestingly, the more I go back and deal with the same people in Metro, I've worn them down now. So now they know if we've got an hour meeting booked, you better believe that first 20 minutes I'm finding out how the dog is, what's happening with the kids, where they've been on their last holiday, where I should be going for a meal while I'm down here. Because
Yeah.
they just know now that I'm not, don't rush me into,
No.
the end result. If I'm going to work with you again, I'm a long burn. I want to know what lights you up. How
Yeah.
can I help you achieve what you're looking to achieve?
Yeah.
If we have that triple win philosophy, it's got to work for you, it's got to work for me, it's got to work for our client, then it's going to build a long-term relationship.
Such an important point because we're always conditioning other people, organizations, entities on how to deal with us. And there's a lot of talk around, what, we've got to be authentic, and whether that word is overused or not, you got to be real, right? So if you're the type of person, whether it's disc personality styles or Myers-Briggs or anything like that, people are different, right? So we have to be like a chameleon and recognize the signals and then adjust accordingly. But there still has to be an underlying baseline philosophy about, hey, this is the way I like to do business, irrespective of whether I'm dealing with a large organization, a government entity, a small, medium business. We're dealing with human beings, right?
Really.
And there's got to be a connection. And the way that I connect, I may not be for everybody, right? And that's okay. But what you'll do is you'll have a good experience of me when we're together. Whether we end up doing business or not, that's the most important thing. And it creates memorability. I remember talking to a guy late last year on this podcast, and um, he's a branding expert from the States, and he added the memorability part, which I'd never even thought about before. Because we all talk about people do business with those who they know, they like, and they trust. But then he added, it's also more important, or actually is equally important, do they remember you?
Mm.
Now, you mentioned before we press record that your nan or your grandmother had who was a big fan of Lucille Ball and had reddish hair and passed the baton to you when you were 15, and you've never really lost that. That's an example of being memorable because people said, "Oh, that I can't quite recall her name, but she she had red
Chick with
hair,
the red
fiery
hair
red
that
hair."
talks about AI. Yep.
That's memorable. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
And
Think about, Dr. Carl.
mm,
We think about Dr. Carl of those crazy shirts that his wife
mm,
makes for him.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
what's that? It's part. I know you've studied NLP. It's in part some of those anchors. How do you create
yeah.
those anchors that somebody goes, Darren, he's got that podcast thing, whatever it is, but whatever it is, people are going to
Yeah,
remember and create their own little triggers.
correct.
But if you can help influence what they are,
Yeah.
happy days.
And the key thing, this is where we're going to jump into AI in a second, is how do I keep showing up? Like
Yeah.
you mentioned that often it's a slow burn. You've got to build credibility with people, particularly in regional, and you've still got to build credibility with people in metropolitan, no matter what sort of size business you're doing it. But just the fact you keep turning up and keep turning up and keep turning up, and it's just consistency. It's not to the point where you'll wear down people, although sometimes that might be a good thing. But you just keep turning up to say, hey, we're going to do business today, or we're going to do business next week, or if we're going to do business in the next 12 months, it's all good, right?
Mm.
Because everyone has their different timing. But what will be the key thing is people will remember you about how you made them feel versus, well, here comes Tracy again. She tried to sell us this stuff the last time, and when she comes, just make sure you're not around or I'm
Yeah,
not here.
quick hide.
You don't
Yeah.
want that. You don't want that, right? You want people to say, as you described, when you drive into the town, you have to do the royal wave because people are lining the streets
Yeah.
and throwing out the welcome mat.
It's
Love
good.
it.
You get the best scones.
Oh, imagine. And you probably get access to information and maybe introductions to people who ordinarily you would never get access to, which is a privilege.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a great word. It's a privilege.
Yeah.
I never take that for granted.
Yeah.
and I'm always very respectful, and I do treat it like a privilege, because once they're letting you in like that, you're family. Like, you
Mm,
can't, that's a different level of respect. That's a different level of
yeah,
relationship, then, that you are
yeah,
trusted,
yeah.
and you need to hold that with the respect that that deserves.
And so when we're talking about this, it's often people and organizations look for what makes them unique or what's their value proposition that makes them different to their competitors. And often they think, well, I've got to try and come up with something around my solution, my product. And they overlook the fact that often the differentiation is you. And that is how you make that person feel in that interaction. And when you leave, are they sad or are they happy? Right? Big difference. And if you have that philosophy that it is a privilege and it's an opportunity to serve, then it won't be about the product. The product will be the natural flow through, but you won't be leading with the product. You'll be leading with integrity, respect, servitude, and stuff like that.
Mm.
Now, which brings us to your current book. Uh, I want to talk about your view on AI because I've spoken to a lot of people over the last maybe 2 years in relation to AI, the proliferation of AI, how it relates to sales, and how some people are really concerned. Oh my God, are we going to lose our jobs, etc., etc. As a as an overarching, I guess, view around AI from a selling and from a leadership point of view, do you have an overarching philosophy and general view on AI and whether it's a good thing or whether it's something we should be concerned with?
It is something that you cannot remain neutral on anymore. You do not have the time or the space now to be sitting on the fence going, I'm just going to wait and see how this one plays out.
Mm. Yeah,
I reflect back on, when we got email, or when we got social media. There was that period of time when people were going, this thing's not going to catch on. Like, oh, I'm just going to bide my time.
yeah,
And a lot of people missed the boat when it came to building a social media profile or understanding how that fits into the sales and marketing landscape,
yeah.
because they chose to ignore it.
Mm.
Or they did in my opinion, which is worse, they did oh, I don't like that. Yeah, I'm sorry, buddy. It's not about you. If your clients are hanging out there, you need to know. Like, if
Yeah.
you want to stay in their orbit, you need to
Mm.
be hanging out where they are. And if that's where
Mm.
they are,
Yeah.
then that's on you.
Yeah.
And I feel like AI has now reached that stage where we no longer have the choice about whether or not we're going to learn, leverage, and lean on it.
Mm.
How we choose to learn, leverage, and lean on it comes back to the same ethics and value conversation that we've had all the way along.
Yeah.
Now is the time for you to decide how transparent you want to be with the use of your AI, with your clients, with your suppliers, with your team.
Yeah.
One of the big things that we're seeing come out of the EU at the moment is a lot of clients and a lot of data on sales and marketing are showing that clients are leaning and preferring to deal with companies and people that are choosing transparency over the way they use AI over those who aren't.
Okay.
So most people now are at a stage where they recognize AI is kind of becoming ubiquitous, right? They
Mm.
know it's in Netflix, it's in Google Maps. They kind of understand that now. But what they don't understand is, well, have you used that to write that email for me? Are you using that to write a blog? Are you using it to help prepare the sales presentation? I don't care if I'm getting
Yeah.
the outcome I want. I
Yeah.
just want to know.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's the crossroad that we are at now, where we have an opportunity to build that values and ethics into our communication.
Mm.
You know, this is how we're using it. I'd love to have a conversation with you about how you feel about that. How are
Yeah.
you guys using it? What are you saying, what's working, what's not working, and just develop that open line of communication because no one has all the answers yet.
Yeah.
But we need to be asking the questions.
Yeah. And with that, because sometimes there was one person I was speaking with, there was an ethical question that came up, and it was in relation to medical practitioners using AI to better diagnose and better provide levels of medical care.
Mhm.
And there were two trains of thought that they were talking about, and they had so almost building the case for using ethically AI to improve the diagnostic ability of a doctor. Because I was saying, okay, if we can use AI in the medical stuff, in the medical realm, you're literally tapping into the intelligence of multiple practitioners around the world and doing it in a really short period of time versus looking at the individual client or the individual patient and trying to diagnose based on what they see. So I was actually leveraging the experience of not just one practitioner, but thousands, if not millions, to potentially get a more accurate diagnosis, which would only improve patient care.
Mhm.
And in that case, because I know, going to a GP, often they would just jump into Google and do this, point that, and see what happens. It's actually using it ethically rather than not, right? So we're going to be forced to embrace it because otherwise we'll be left behind.
Mm.
How much of it is an ethical dilemma? And I know you mentioned the word before, transparency. Are you seeing organizations who are using this well being more proactively transparent, or is there still a bit of a like a oh, we can't show everything because it means that we're not being authentic if we're using AI to build a proposal or to build a presentation for a customer? What are your thoughts on that?
Both. And it's interesting you started with the medical thing. I we have this conversation all the time. I have two elderly parents in their 90s, and I've said to my dad, I'm at a point now where I would rather be seen by an AI doctor than by a doctor that I walk into that's in a practice that I've never met before, and it's like just cuts. You've got 7 minutes. Um, and what's the first question the GP asks?
Hmm,
What's wrong?
what's wrong?
I don't freaking know, mate. You're the one with the medical like I'm just here because
You're
I've got
supposed
a
to tell
sore
me.
throat or my, like don't ask me to diagnose. So, but then I kind of think, well, I've got my aura ring, which is tracking my sleep, my heart rate, my oxygen levels, my steps. I've got my watch that's tracking blood pressure and all of that kind of stuff. If that's uploaded into a safe, like
Hmm,
let's all assume this is ethical, into
yes.
a safe location, and I can jump on and have a conversation with a AI that word, um,
Yep.
then it's going to have my complete medical background
Yes.
and it's potentially going to be seeing things that a human GP is not.
Yeah.
Where and this correlates really, really nicely for me in the sales and the marketing and the business landscape because I think we're in the same space. If I, as a human, there is so much data out there on me now, my
Yep.
purchase history, my likes, my choices, all of that. If you, as a salesperson, can have access to that, would that not give you a better run at what it is that I am likely to embed into my lifestyle or
Mm,
to utilize more or to get a better response from or whatever that widget, that service, that product is that you're selling me,
yeah.
I'm going to get a much better experience at the end if you've had access to that information and you've compiled that in an ethical response.
Yeah.
The human in the loop, and I think that's an important thing to always distinguish. For me, it always starts with relationships and humans because the AI should be there as a collaborator, not a competitor. It gives me the data, it gives me the overview, it gives me the black and white and the stats. And now it gives me as the human, as the salesperson, as the marketer, the opportunity, the leader to review all of that information and think strategically.
Mm,
Oh, that's interesting. That didn't last very long, but this is still being utilized, even though it's 10 years old and that's, gone through three iterations.
mm.
I know because I've chatted with Darren several times that he's a Collingwood supporter or a Carlton supporter. I'm going to wait for you to either smile or growl at me.
Neither.
Um, Neither, right?
Just insert Melbourne.
Excellent. I should be saying Brisbane Lions, but whatever, I know because of that if I put that information with that data, I'm going to get you a far better result. So it
Yes.
needs the human and it needs the AI, I think, working and collaborating, not competing.
And I think that's I'm glad you said that because the overriding theme that I'm getting from all the people I'm talking to, and particularly the last couple of years, is that AI is an augmenter. It is not going to replace, certainly it's not going to replace sales people. There may be elements of the sales process that you could use AI to leverage and provide a better, uh, maybe a better cost to serve or a better level of service to a customer and shorten the sales cycle times or buying cycles. But it's rare you're going to have in the sales realm at least people being replaced by AI because they still want to have a human. Most people still want to have a human interaction.
Make no mistake, I do believe that we will see a redistribution of roles. However, certainly when I was the salesperson, I hated the paperwork
Yeah.
that went along with it, right? Put me in front of a person, I will chat for hours. Make me then fill in my CRM or
Yes.
update my pipeline or, oh my God, just shoot me now. That they're the roles I want AI to do.
Yeah.
Take that off my plate.
Yeah.
Give me the data, give me the intel that I need to better serve my clients. Because
Mm.
guess what? Then instead of serving 10 clients a week, maybe now I've got capacity for 15.
Yes.
Maybe now I've got capacity to open up a depth of relationship that I couldn't get to before because I had to churn through a lot more clients,
Mm.
to get to the point where I could actually sell to them.
Yeah.
So I think there will absolutely be a redistribution of roles. We're already seeing it. Best estimates from McKinsey and the likes is anywhere between 25 to 50% of the entire workforce will be disrupted in some way.
Yep.
My gut feel is AI is forcing us to be more strategic. It's forcing us to have better conversations. It's forcing us to level up
Mm.
to be of better service to our clients, our
Yeah.
suppliers, our team. That's where I think it's take the stuff. I don't want to do the admin. Take it. That's what it's great at.
Yeah.
Here you go. Just let me go and chat to people
Yeah.
and you do you, buddy. You AI, you do you, buddy, and leave me doing what I'm great at.
Yeah. And look, and I really like that, and I totally agree with that. The other part of it is for us to be strategic, we can't, and this is, I think, the danger that some sales leaders and some executives are being concerned about is if I'm trying to influence you, Tracy, right, in your role, I can use AI to gather a lot of information and build a proposal, build a strategy, and so forth. But at some stage, you and I still have to have a conversation, right? So the actual intelligence of what AI can do and the amount of information that can provide you is one thing, but at some point we still have to have that human interaction. And what you'll be doing as a potential customer or potential client is asking yourself, whether it be directly or at least in your head, okay, is the relationship we're building here, is what Darren's talking about, does he understand me? Right? Does he understand all this background, or is he just throwing stuff in proposals and he can't now verbalize that? I think that's the next evolution of this because there are people who are relying a lot on AI, but when it comes time to actually doing a presentation or doing a pitch or having a conversation, they can't sit back and plug it into an AI machine and then pop out the answer and then distribute it via email. They've got to actually have the conversation.
Mm,
And there
mm,
has to be a connection between those two bits of information.
mm.
Thoughts?
Yeah, For me, again, I think it's only going to be a good thing because I think it is going to weed out the people that shouldn't be there.
I love it.
Right? If you can't articulate why we are having a conversation, you are never going to get my sale anyway.
Yeah.
Um, I think what I'm seeing is um, particularly Australians, right? We have this amazing bullshit barometer.
We do.
You send me something, and now you and I have had a conversation. I'm going to know immediately, pretty much. I'm going to have a pretty good sniff test on
Yeah.
whether you've used an LLM, a large language model, ChatGPT, Copilot, whatever you've used. I have a pretty good sniff at whether Darren's written that or Darren's popped in a couple of like dot dot dot
Yeah.
and got it to send off
Mm.
because we've had a conversation. I now know your tonality. I now know your phraseology. I now know your bad dad jokes. And if I get an email that's a bunch of emojis
Yes.
and, and language that I can just go, then I'm immediately cautious.
Mm.
So from a sales, from any point of view right now, the biggest thing I say to my clients is the best thing you can do right now is learn how to prompt,
Yeah.
learn how to have a good conversation with your LLM that is giving you high quality results.
Mm.
Because if you are putting beige out into the market,
Yeah.
yeah, ain't gonna be here for much longer.
Really powerful point. And it's almost like, well, the quality of the responses is going to be based on the quality of the questions you ask. So
Isn't that true of humanity from the get-go?
it is. And when you think about the artificial intelligence, the same thing applies. And we talk about, back in the day, the computer spits out based on what the computer has been inputted,
Exactly.
right?
That's exactly right.
So,
Which is why you need the human in the loop.
well, you do.
The computer can give you all of the black and white data analysis that it likes.
Yes.
The strategy, the emotion, the humanity is our role as the conduit to go, okay, I get this, but now let's synthesize it through the human brain
Yes.
and put it into Darren language.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what do you say to people that said, okay, I can, for example, take ChatGPT and I can train ChatGPT to use my tonality because I'm really dialed in on, okay, they're not the words I use, and I'll just ask it to refine it to do this and do that because that is it, that becomes more like me.
Yep.
Because then I have to vet it because I use, full disclosure, I use ChatGPT sometimes to write short posts, or maybe I use for this episode, for example, I'm going to throw this episode into a AI machine called Decipher, and what that will give me is show notes, quotable quotes. It'll give me title suggestions. It'll give me all sorts of different stuff, right?
Mhm.
But even with that, I still have to vet it and say, does that sound like me? Does that actually articulate the feeling of the episode? So you've still got to have that checking mechanism, not just take it as, wow, this is fantastic. I'll just throw it out to the ether.
Yeah.
Can't do that.
Look, let's be real, Darren. This is AI. I've just dialed in my clone, my AI bot because I'm off getting my nails done right now. Um,
Geez, it's very similar to you though.
I know,
It's
I know.
amazing.
Look, it's advancing all the
Mm.
time, can I just say? Imagine how I'll look in another 3 months. I love Cast Magic, by the way. I don't know if you've checked that out, but Cast Magic is my favorite for repurposing content. We are getting closer and closer. And I use ChatGPT now like I used to use Google.
Yeah.
And I say to my clients, that's what you should be doing now. So
Yes.
anytime you go to Google something, instead of Googling,
Yep.
apologies to the Google overlords, you should absolutely be opening up ChatGPT and asking and using it that way because A, it's going to start to give you an indication of how quickly it is advancing.
Yeah.
B, it's going to let you know how the systems are starting to think so you can be found as a salesperson, as a brand, as an organization, how
Mm.
you can be found on AI as opposed to SEO or Google or whatever,
Yeah.
which you need to be start to considering. Um, but the other thing it does is the more you use it, the more it reflects, sounds like, interprets, and understands you, your tonality, your phrasing, your beliefs, your structure,
Yeah.
etc., etc.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So that was what I was going to ask you next in terms of people listening to this, whether it be a salesperson, a sales leader, a person responsible for building customer relationships, expanding business, and so forth. Some tactics and ideas to use, and without summarizing what's in the book, because when it comes out, we want people to get a copy of it. Some tangible things that people can do in relation to embracing or at least educating themselves a bit better on this thing called artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence is depending on who you talk to.
Mm,
Um, so you've spoken about using it potentially like a Google machine. Because the other part I didn't ask you about was there's a lot of educational institutions that are still placing bans on students, for example, not using AI and thinking, well, are you guys delusional? Because when they get into the real world, they're going to be expected to use it, and that's just nuts. Anyway.
we are setting up our next immediate generation of school leavers for failure.
Mm,
My personal opinion. I just did get this. This will amuse you if it doesn't like make you choke on your peanuts listening at home. Swallow them now because it might. I've just finished doing a mentoring gig for one of the prominent universities with a group of master's students, masters, right? Not diploma, not
yeah,
degree, master's students in IT. The project that I mentored them through was their AI project.
yeah.
They were not allowed to use AI for the project.
So they've done an AI project, and they weren't allowed
For
to
a
use AI.
master's in IT, right? Tell me that makes sense. Tell me we are sending these graduates into the marketplace ready to face what is happening.
Yeah, no,
We're not.
no.
And I had to sit down with the dean and go, am I being punked?
Yeah. Is there a camera here somewhere?
Seriously, how do I mentor these kids? I say that
Yeah.
respectfully. Everybody's a kid to me now. How do I mentor these humans through this project
Mm,
when you're asking them to effectively pull out an abacus and puppets and crayons to get this thing together? Like it does not make sense. So and every workshop I do, every keynote, every boardroom conversation, I always get parents that say to me, my kid's just been done for plagiarism,
right.
right? Because they've put their thing through. So here is what I will say to you that I say to every person. I put a chapter of my book through 5 different AI plagiarism tools.
Yeah.
The least that came back was 5%. The most that came back was 85 and something percent.
Wow.
I know what I used.
Yeah.
And I built a system to help me think through from an ideal reader's perspective. And I would challenge it and blah, blah, blah. It did not write it for me.
Mm,
These plagiarism tools are quite frankly rubbish. They
yeah.
really are. It's a bit like the Jimi Hendrix, 3 chords and the truth. It just feels like it'll pull up a couple of words and go, yep, nah, you're done, buddy. So I think we need to be really cautious. The educational institutions, I feel at the moment, are reactive, not responsive.
Hmm.
So they're kind of going, we don't get this. It's going to go away. La 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 la.
Ostrich
Um,
principle, head in the sand.
let's just go back to if everybody turns their textbook to page 132 of the Encyclopedia Britannica, right? Like that's kind of where we're at. Yet when I have two grandbabies that are only in primary school, by the time they finish school, they're not going to need to write, they're not going to need to drive. They're not, like we're not setting we want to be a smart country, a smart community, start freaking acting like it. We're going to go off onto a political tangent that's going to need alcohol, Darren.
It
So
will, and it's only middle of the afternoon,
I
so
know.
we
Well, it's
we
five
might
o'clock
save
for
that
me,
for another
surely.
another conversation. So what we're saying is we've got to learn to leverage this and use it for good, not for evil, right? But also don't give it all the power that what it's giving me. It is information, but you've also got to make sure it fits with your own approach. Does it sound like you? Does it fit the remit you've given it? In other words, just check it. Does it sound like
Values
you?
and ethics. It for me, it always comes back to values and ethics.
Yeah,
Like I say to all of my clients, they know exactly what I will and won't use for AI.
yeah,
Basically, I'll use it for anything. I'll give anything
yes,
a crack.
yeah,
And I'll let them know that was rubbish.
mm,
Don't do that again. Or, here's how I refined it.
yeah,
But you got to be prepared to have a play. Like
yeah,
be curious. You've got to be curious right now.
mm,
If you're not curious, you're, essentially probably sadly not going to have a business in the next few years because it is moving that quickly
it
that
is.
we aren't going to be able to keep up. We're just
No,
not.
no,
The average tenure of roles, apparently, like the latest research I was reading, back in the day when I left school, your average tenure of a job was around 10 to 15 years. The Boffins kind of reckon that by 2030, the average tenure before you are going to need to completely reskill 3 to 6 months.
yeah. It's frightening, isn't it?
Well, is it? I mean, it's the next
For some, it
evolution,
would be.
right? It's the
It
next
is.
evolution. So, sure, if you want to see it as frightening, that's okay. Doesn't mean that you're not going to need to start exploring it.
No, it's true, but it's frightening, particularly for people who have been in the same role for a lot of time and have the lack of the lack of desire to want to change. And they're the ones that will say, "Why do we have to change this? It's not
We've
broken."
always done it like this.
That's right.
And you know what? I would push back and say, I don't know that that's being frightened, that's being overwhelmed. And there's a
Yeah.
difference. This is overwhelming.
Mm,
100%. This is
mm.
overwhelming. It's the same as when we were faced with, like, oh, guess what, guys? Now you've got to have a Facebook profile if you want to build a sales career.
Yes.
Now you've got to use LinkedIn. Oh, no, it's not for having your resume on there anymore. You actually build a
Yeah.
pipeline through LinkedIn.
I do.
Oh, really? Like, how do we do that?
Yeah.
You need to a fourth grader's fifth grader's God, right? You
Yeah.
don't need to be an absolute MIT guru in AI. You just need to know as much as your client because right now they are really happy if you're learning alongside them.
That's it.
Hey, I
That's
found
it.
this out. Check this out. Let's do this. What happens if we do that? Hey, let's send each other our email responses with ChatGPT for the next three emails and see how it
See what
goes.
happens.
Like,
Yeah.
turn it into a bit of a
Gamification.
game.
Yeah,
Check,
absolutely.
check what worked, what didn't. But I think
Absolutely.
now's the opportunity for you to be building that rapport with your clients along the way. Hey,
Yep.
we need to be embracing this. Do you want let's make a game out of it. Let's see how much we can kind of figure out what Darren wrote.
Totally. And I think that's a good way to sort of wrap this up. And that at the end of the day, we're still going to be dealing with human beings. But to not utilize AI and the opportunities it presents us with to streamline what we do, as you mentioned before, to take a lot of the admin heavy lifting that perhaps we've had to do in the past, give that to AI, but also leverage AI and be curious about using AI, whether it be ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever the mechanism is,
Yeah.
just be curious and learn to leverage it, because as long as it's matching the ethics and the values and who we are and what we stand for, at the end of the day, people are still going to be doing business with those who they know, they like, and they trust. Just use AI as a complementor to that, not as a replacement of that.
Think of it as another team member.
Totally. Absolutely.
And just like another team member, if you're onboarding someone, you have to train it like you were
Mm,
onboarding someone.
totally.
Day one, where are the toilets? What time's lunch? Where are the policies and procedures? You've got to treat it like another team member. The best way to play with it, I reckon, we've had a lot of fun in workshops where people have created, Easter egg hunts, or they've
Yep.
written a song for their grandma's birthday based on, I know you're a Michael Bublé fan, right? Like, write me a song about grandma. Here's the 10 things to coming home, or,
Mm,
or give me a treasure hunt for my kid's birthday.
yeah.
Here's the locations, here's the things.
Yeah.
Play with it. If you're overwhelmed or nervous about using it inside of work, play with it in a family perspective.
Totally. Totally. Because the thing, and we'll leave this message here, AI is everywhere. And there are people interacting with you right now who are actually using AI to do that interaction with. So so in other words, embrace it, encapsulate that, and don't be the horse and carriage providers back in the day when they were transitioning out of horse and carriage into the car, thinking about I need to get a faster horse. No, no, embrace the technology and don't be afraid of it.
Yeah.
So Tracy, hey, really appreciate this. I mean, it's gone for an hour. Fascinating conversation, and we could talk a lot more. In fact, we might have to do another conversation. For people listening to this who'd like to know more about you, the work you do, but also to get your book, which is coming out, is it early May?
Yeah, so well, printing, 28th of May, it's
28th of
due to
May.
officially land. And I do have if they go to aiandyou.com, then it will take you to the landing page to grab a pre-copy,
Nice.
where I'm doing a bunch of different stuff. But look, throw my name, Tracy Sheen, no E in Tracy. I keep them for the surname. Throw them into LinkedIn, throw them into the ether, and you'll get something about some crazy red chick that talks about AI pop up somewhere.
Awesome. I'll put those in the show notes, and I highly recommend people listening to this to plug in, connect with you on LinkedIn, listen to what you're doing, and watch your progress because you're an absolute superstar. So thank you so much. It's been a fabulous conversation, and thanks for being a guest on the podcast.
Thank you, Darren.
Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com, and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.